You are listening to the Power of Inspiration and Awakening Radio with Julia Griffin. To master a higher frequency for a new state of mind. Once you walked in a forest of splendor in which everything you did and everything you thought was aligned. It is possible at this time to begin to return to the old knowledge. Intuitive healer and manifester Julia Griffin is here to talk about this unique time in history when all sentient beings, animals, plants, trees, and the earth are intent on creating this change. The wolves awakened her to the most incredible light, which opened gifts and brought knowledge that she longs to share. You are creators, and you are born to be creators of beauty, possibility, and joy. Join Julia on a journey into a beautiful and magical world where amazing possibilities exist. Let us help open the door. The Power of Inspiration and Awakening with Julia Griffin starts right now.
Hi, I'm Julia Griffin, and I'm here this week with my show, and we're going to be talking about nature. One of the things that we talk about regularly is the development of the inner self and how we can manifest more in our lives, because this is a normal part of spiritual development. So today's guest that I have is Micah Nillson. She's the co-founder of Alchemy, a company offering spagyric and alchemical extracts of herbs and minerals for healing, meditation, and spiritual work. Micah is a self-taught herbalist. She works with her partner Paul to understand the intelligences and virtues of plants through direct connection with them in nature and in the lab. She believes that spagyric practice offers a unique and important path to greater connection to the intelligence of nature through healing plants. And she loves sharing that connection with others through websites, lectures, and writings. Welcome, Micah.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Julia. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I'm really excited about it. I want to tell the people who are here that it was my connection with nature and with wolves that was the main part of my awakening. And so it wasn't just my spiritual nature or my meditating or any of those things. It was suddenly seeing how the physical and the spiritual world came together. And I'm sure that all of you know that we're moving into a great feminine age. To me, that means that we can now apply some of the male things that we've learned that are electrical, and that would be like computers, our homes with flowing water, lights that come on and off, the way that we're comfortable with the incredible wisdom that comes with nature. And I'm going to assume I'm right since my cat jumped in my lap and the dog is right here in my lap. And I'm going to say that the other thing that we have with this is Uranus and Taurus. Uranus is spiritual change. Taurus is the earth and creating things out of the earth. And so our next level of growth is on the spiritual and physical level. What's fascinating to me about Micah is that she epitomizes some of the very early teachings that were well known in the Middle Ages that probably came from Egypt. And she's going to tell us how we can use these spiritual and physical things so that we can utilize this opportunity to grow that's here during this age of awakening. So, Micah, will you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you became interested in it?
Well, certainly. And I'm really glad that you led into this with your idea about connecting with nature, because for me, that's where it really all comes from. I think alchemy and spagyric, just like any practice, there's as many reasons to do it as there are people doing it. But for me, it really comes from that background of working with the plants and understanding what they have to offer in terms of healing and spiritual support, and just understanding the context that all of that comes from. I think, when we reach out and look at nature a little bit further outside of ourselves, we create a much better context to do our own work within. And that's the kind of connection that this work has really offered to me. And that's where I'm really coming from with this work and what's so important to me. And that's where I had started studying with herbal healing and medicine and so forth as a teenager. And then Paul, my partner, comes from a more hermetic Western esoterics background. And so the work that we do together is kind of a combination of those two different things.
And I want to point out here that we're probably speaking to people right now. If you're feeling this in your heart, you have probably had past lifetimes of working with herbs and understanding this kind of knowledge. I think when I was about 8 years old, I went out in the woods and I dug up all these plants. I lived on a farm and took them home and made my own little garden. When I was older and studied herbs, it was pretty fascinating because I had collected herbs that healed and helped with the specific conditions that I had. I had a lot of colds then. Yarrow was one of the herbs that I had gathered. To me, it was just a pretty fern. But a lot of us have this knowledge from many other lifetimes. And as we're moving into the light, it is really time to develop it and to do something with it. Did you grow up on a farm too, Micah?
I did. I grew up on a farm, and also I had hippie parents that let me wander around in the woods too. We went camping a lot because we didn't have a lot of money, and camping is free. And so I spent a lot of time in nature, in the more cultivated nature of the farm, and also wild nature in the mountains and the forests in Colorado. And it's funny you mentioned yarrow. That's one of my favorite plants from way back too. To me, that's the smell of camping. You know, that's the smell of the plants that are there when you're hiking, and you pick them and use them to support yourself. And it's one of the first herbs that I learned because it's very safe and it's very gentle, but it's so effective for so many things that can happen, you know, for cuts and scrapes and blisters and so forth.
Yeah, and the Romans carried that one into battle because I think there were 100 different uses for it. But
it's a very useful plant. It really is. It's one of my favorites in the garden too because it's just so beautiful.
It really is. It's easy to grow. If you all want to get started with one plant, that's a great one because it can be very decorative or very simple. Where I wanted to go with this is that we really are in a place where we are moving into a combination of the ancient world and the modern world. I think I talked about this on my last show. If you can see it energetically, it's like there's sort of somewhere in the middle, like two gray clouds that are coming together. And so when we use these things, it makes a huge difference. I'm just going to go ahead and say, I've been taking a tincture now from some weeks that Micah sent to me, and it is actually so that you experience more of your inner self. And I have to say, I think that it's really working and that I feel strengthened and different when I take it. So it's certainly worth trying and listening. What would be your favorite right now? I know anybody who's an herbalist changes their favorites, but
I know it's like asking for a favorite child. The one that I sent you that you're talking about is probably the abramelin, right? Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a really good one. That one is actually part of the very hermetic lineage that we belong to. And originally it was an incense formula. And you've probably noticed that taking it. It has a really aromatic sort of quality to it. And it was originally used as an incense for part of a ritual of contacting the holy guardian angel. And the idea of connecting with that higher aspect of yourself or that higher being that's not yourself, depending on how you see that. And our idea of working with it internally was that you could be connected with that being all the time. Not to shortcut the ritual work if that's something you want to do, but if you take it internally, that sort of guidance just becomes integral to you and it becomes this constant part of your nature. And so I think it's a really supportive one. Whether you realize it or not, you take it and you just go about your day, and your actions and your thoughts and your just very being is really aligned with your higher purpose in that way. And I think that constant connection can be so helpful when you're in times of change or exploration or just trying to figure things out, because I think it really gives you a link to where everything you do, even if you don't consciously think of it, is going to be aligned from that place, and it's going to flow from your highest nature and bringing in that confidence. And so that's one I find I recommend to people quite a lot because it's just so applicable to so many different times that we go through.
If there's one that you probably want to start with for greater inner knowledge and grounding and feeling more aligned, that would definitely be a great place to start. The other thing I'm going to point out is that when you align with nature and the plant kingdoms, it really changes your physical energy because everything is changing here on the earth and we need that grounded energy as well.
It's true. And let's talk about that a little bit, because I want people to understand kind of what they're tapping into here and how we're tapping into that guidance of nature, because I think it's important to understand, as I said, the context that it all belongs to besides just the specific plant. So the idea in Hermetic work, which is the lineage that we belong to, is the really important tenet that probably most people listening have heard: as above, so below. And the idea behind that is that everything that we see here on Earth is a reflection of something on a higher plane, right? And everything on that higher plane is holding an archetype for what gets manifest here. Now, I look at as above, so below in this sort of funny, paradoxical way as being horizontal too. So it sounds silly, but the idea of, as in me, so in you, right? As in a plant, so in a person. That's an important corollary here too. So if we ourselves know that we have a body, we have a spirit, we have a soul, we can understand through this correlation that plants do too. That these are what we're going to work with in our processing and do different extractions for each of those levels so that it correlates to each person. And why we might do this, why this might be important, kind of brings us back to ideas of healing, because the body of a plant or the body of a person, that's where that being is interfacing with the world, right? That's its apparent being in this world. But really, the higher intelligence is the source of that. That higher intelligence is manifesting through that physical, but it's a higher level of being that's guiding that. And that's where we need to try to connect with those plants. So I have an exercise that I like to do. I look at a plant and I see, I see its stems and its leaves and its flowers, and maybe it has a fruit that's really delicious to me, or I know it has this useful medicinal chemistry. But I like to think, okay, that's useful to me, but what is it doing for the plant? How is it useful for that plant? Where did it come from? And so how can I kind of reach back? The plant's intelligence and its usefulness is reaching towards me with what it does. But how can I understand that on the plant's term and kind of reach back towards it and meet it halfway and have this open willingness to connect with that? And I think that idea of the re-enchantment of matter is a really special gift of this work.
Well, we can go back to the indigenous belief that there's an exchange, and Pythagoras said the same thing, that when we have this exchange with plants, with the crystal, or whatever, and that exchange strengthens us, it in turn, for example, might strengthen the comfrey plant that I just took the leaf from, as opposed to just letting that all go down into fall and rot back into the earth. No, I've picked a leaf, I've made a tea from it. It took me to a higher vibration. That plant receives my vibration and it actually evolves.
I believe so too. And actually one of my plants that I really do like working with too, to do a more specific example so people can understand how this kind of plays out in my mind, is a Northwestern plant. It's called Devil's Club. And it lives up here. It's a Northwest native plant that lives in the beautiful temperate rainforest of my area. And it's a plant of strength and stamina and vitality and immune defenses. And it's a very old healing plant that a lot of the First Nations of my area use. And it's really spiny. It's so spiny. It's covered in just wicked, wicked thorns. It's so well defended. And it shows a very strong defense energy to it, a very Mars energy is what we call that. And it shows that Marsy kind of energy. And it makes logging very difficult. And so the early settlers really hated it because it grew all through the forest and hassled them and was very difficult to work with. But bears love it. And it has these delicious berries that they eat and they spread the seeds of. And so obviously more Devil's Club will grow from that. And in particular, it grows at riversides and it shades the water so that the salmon can spawn. So the salmon is another important food for the bear, and the bear eats it. And through the bear, the salmon feeds the forest, and that feeds the trees, and that feeds the home for all of them. And so that's kind of, you can see where the bear sort of steps into that cycle. Now, energetically for us, Devil's Club is a very intense herb of power. It's used to work magic, and it's used to also protect from magic. So in a more modern use, a lot of herbalists and myself included, I really like it to find your inner strength again after you've had a trauma or recovering from an addiction. It can really help you pull that back. And so that shows kind of its dual nature. When we've looked at how it lives in the forest and what it's for, we can see its kind of dual nature. It's all about the right use of power. We gather that power when it's appropriate. We defend ourselves from it at other times. And so in one relationship, we have the loggers and the settlers. They hated it. It interfered with their destructive power that they wanted to tame the wilderness. But the bear lives with it more in harmony and derives strength from it. And the bear is a link in that cycle. She is that fierce defender of her cubs, but she's also the nurturing mother to them. So again, there's that dual nature of power. And so we can kind of see that whole cycle and see, okay, that's what this plant offers. That's what I can be in the cycle of this plant. And I can learn to work with it spagirically, learn to work with it myself to open that intelligence and connect with that at a higher level so that I'm using my power in the right way too, in the same way that this plant is teaching me to. And kind of any ecosystem, any plant, if you approach it with that idea of conversation, you can understand it in that way, no matter what plant it has.
Mm-hmm. And then people also don't know, we were doing as above, so below, that whatever herbs, whatever plants are growing in your lawn or your flower beds or in the forest around you, those herbs are actually helping you. Someone who's very knowledgeable with herbs can walk around someone's property and pretty much see their physical conditions. The reason that this is so important to me is because I learned from the wolves that there's cycles in nature and there are plants in nature. And they're what I call shortcuts. And this is another reason that I have Micah here today, is because these are incredible shortcuts that people have known about for such a long time. And most of the spiritual community does not know about them. And it will really make a gigantic difference as the energy continues to change. Another shortcut with these is like you were saying, it's protective. So if you've gotten to the point with your awakening or your transformation that you're seeing parts of yourself that you need to change, then this is a great thing to examine. So you just said use Devil's Club as protection. So that's incredibly important. Yes, it's a very
protective herb, and you can see that in its spiny nature. You know, when you just look at the plant, you're like, oh, I don't want to mess with that plant.
So for women, it does make you more assertive. I can tell you that because I've taken it in the past and sometimes I'm taking it now. What might be some of the other qualities? I'm sure it depends also upon the person who's taking it. But what might be some of the other changes that might occur?
From the Devil's Club, it's a good adaptogen. It's related to ginseng, so it has a nice energy tonic property to it. I like that about it. And it just has a really nice quality of your relationship to power. So it can be very assertive and very aggressive at first if you need to work through that. But that kind of comes down to that planetary energy. And what is your relationship with Mars? I mean, it's a very, very Marsy, hot, fiery, prickly sort of plant. And so initially, if that's something you need to work through, I feel like, the best way out is through. And so it can really push your buttons and create that sort of fire. But if you work with that and persist with it, you can also lean on that and find the amount of assertiveness that is perfect for you and the amount of strength that you need to draw on, but doesn't, tip over into anger. And it's a good energy tonic also. And it was used in a lot of shamanic ritual, again, of protection and also of either receiving or showing or defending from other powers, depending on what you're working with there.
Right. I want to talk about two things. I'm going to go very briefly with this. If you read my newsletters, and that's onetrueself.com, onetrueself.com, I write a lot about the moon. So I'm going to tell you some of the things that I discovered about the moon, and then I'm going to let Micah tell you what she does, which is much more complex. But when the moon is waxing, start a project that you want to have come to completion or that you have a certain amount that you want to do by the full moon. It pulls in interest. It pulls in people. If you trim the garden or you weed the garden while the moon is waxing, it grows back. And you'll even have more weeds than you did to begin with. That I found this out, much to my chagrin, because I didn't believe any of this and I wanted to see if it was true. If you go through the waning moon, that's the time to let go of things. That's the time to look at yourself and see what you want to change. If you're ending something, it's a wonderful time to do that then. And then the new moon is a point of stillness. I learned this from working in a really large garden. But could you tell them just a little bit about the days of the week and the hours that you use? Because it's incredible.
Yes, certainly. So the Hermetic tradition, if you step back just a little bit from the spagyric plant work, their links through the Hermetic tradition kind of goes out. The other branch of that is talisman making. And Paracelsus, who came up with spagyrics, also made talismans. And so there's a lot of commonalities between those two things. We actually like to think of the spagyrics as sort of living talismans. So the same way you might make a piece of jewelry to convey a particular energy or, bring a certain flow into your life, this is very much the same preparation in a way, except you're working with plants instead of gold and silver and gemstones and so forth. And so the timing comes from that tradition. The timing of it, the idea is that we have the 7 classical planets, and each one of those rules particular days and time cycles. And so in the same way that a person is born at a particular time and they have kind of a stamp of that moment on themselves, in reverse, we can pick a time and say, okay, I want a time that represents, for the Devil's Club, Mars at the highest level of being. And so we'll work on particular days and times to back that up. And so, as I said, that as above, so below is so important because each of those planets is linked to a particular plant, organ, body function, and so forth. And so when you support that and emphasize that through your timing, you create sort of a living talisman that's like the perfect representation of that energy. And so ours goes by the days of the week is one level. And then there's also 2 different sets of hours that go by that start at sunrise. But the days of the week is the easiest one to figure. And the cool thing about that is if you look at the day of the week that you were born on, that is what's called your spirit level of being. And that has to do with your energy, your vitality, your basic intelligence. And that's a really good level to start working with. And it's also cool because it's just the easiest to figure. You don't need big charts to figure it. So yeah, I'll just go through them here. So Monday is Moon. Tuesday is Mars. Wednesday is Mercury. Thursday is Jupiter. Friday is Venus. And then Saturday and Sunday are fairly obvious. Saturday is Saturn and Sunday is Sun. And so that's an interesting starting point to kind of work with those energies, to work with the energy at the center of your being, because that spirit level is what connects your body and your soul. And so it's I think of it as kind of the shoehorn level for starting to work with this system. And I actually just recently wrote an article on our website about how to figure that out and how to work with that. If you go to our site and look for the article called Supporting the Spirit, you can take a look at that and see how to figure it, because it's really interesting. It's a really useful way to start thinking about these energies and start thinking about just supporting them in this archetypal kind of way, because the idea of the spagyrics is that talisman of the perfect representation of that energy. And you have that energy in a way, but we all kind of drift away from perfection as life goes on. And so relying on something to kind of reset that pattern and reset that template can be really useful to draw on those strengths.
Particularly when we're going through a time, to me, it seems that I'll go through an awakening and I'll feel really great about myself and I'll see how I'm growing. And then I'm like, oh, gosh, I've still got all these other things I've got to work through. Look where I'm blocked. And then I'll think, well, that's okay, because you'll learn a lot. This is one of our major reasons for talking about this week. These spagyric formulas are shortcuts. They get you through them a lot more quickly. And who doesn't want that? This is a theme that I often come to is, it's wonderful that you've awakened. It's wonderful that you're developing your gifts. But how committed are you to that process? And if you are committed to that process, don't you want to take advantage of teachers, of products like this, of crystals, of the animals in your life? Don't you want that true boost that can truly come with awakening? And I feel that the spagyrics truly offer this. I know that you feel the same way.
I do. In the work that we've been doing with this for almost 30 years now, I've seen so many changes and so many stories with people and just so many manifestations of these energies in different ways. Each person has a different relationship with each of those planets, but you can also see overarching patterns too that are so interesting where it's that interface between the person and that particular plant, but that plant also has its own intelligence and there's similarities no matter who takes that particular plant. And that to me shows those cooperative intelligences working together. It's me ingesting the plant, but the plant has its own being too.
And if you spend enough time in nature, you start to notice all kinds of patterns that are related to inner growth. And you learn to recognize plants by the patterns in which their leaves grow. And everything starts to speak to you. And I know a lot of people are in cities and you can't go there, but this is a wonderful way to begin and to recognize.
Yeah, and you can have a plant on your windowsill. and just hang out with
Yeah.
it too. You can have a little house plant and connect with it. There's a lot of herbs that grow very well on windowsills. That's a great place to start.
You can buy dry herbs and imagine that you're vibrating light into them or asking them to help you in a certain way, and then make tea from them. It's an interesting thing, but let's just say yarrow, it probably has 10 different healing qualities. So if you bought dried yarrow, you put your hand over it and think about asking it to heal a specific ailment. And that actually works, as surprising as that is.
And that's
So
one of the
we're
things
going-
I think the Juric processing is really good at, just kind of sort of picking out in the individual herb effects, because you might have a whole collection of things that belong to that herb or that planet, but then as the processor, you can emphasize one or the other with how you focus on your processing with it.
And that's intention. And we're going to talk more about intention and clearing blocks and patterns through alchemical formulations. We're talking with Micah Nillson. And when we come back, we'll look at how you can use these tools to improve your life. Let's go to break now.
How many times do you find yourself saying, "It was nothing"? Next time someone tells you, "Great job," you'll know how to accept it and not deflect it by listening to Courage to be Seen Radio with host Sherry Clark. Sherry Clark is an experienced global engineering leader, coach, and mentor. From her experiences one-on-one coaching to corporate consulting and executive coaching, Sherry has learned many women need at least 3 things to discover and face success. Learn about the ACES program, how to survive male-dominated fields with grace and authenticity, and reach the top without ever once giving up on who you are. Courage to be Seen host Sherry Clark explores the awesome power of your entire self. Check out her website, couragetobeseen.com, and listen to the first Tuesday of the month at 11 a.m. Pacific with host Sherry Clark. You have the courage to be seen. See you later.
We remember a time when you could simply form a thought and it would manifest. The harmony was forgotten, but it is returning now. The Power of Inspiration and Awakening Radio with Julia Griffin on TransformationTalkRadio.com each second and fourth Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific. We'll take you on adventures through the heart and spirit, exploring who we once were. This intuitive healer studied under the guidance of wolves, learning from their wisdom to master a higher frequency for a new state of mind. Visit OneTrueSelf.com.
Coming to you live on TransformationTalkRadio.com is the Brilliance Ultimatum. Time's Up with Claudette Rowley. Powerful conversations, practical innovations, and transformative solutions as Claudette and her guests delve into the possibilities and what she calls reality resistance. Join the cultural revolution and annihilate obstacles. Check it out at culturalbrilliance.com.
Sometimes being human has its challenges. Our physical health falters, our spirits sag, our dreams don't immediately come to fruition. Welcome to the power of Maximum Medicine Radio. Join me, Doc Martin, in conversations that will blow your mind about healing. In our hit show, Doc Martin addresses the scientific with bridging to the mystical approaches to give you a new narrative about maximum medicine. In this live call-in show, we will journey into the extraordinary genius of the human body and talk about other beliefs that impact being your multidimensional self. We seek the seen and the unseen and explore the earthbound and the otherworldly, all with the purpose of calling forth the maximum you. To learn more about Doc Martin and Maximum Medicine, visit www.sharonmartinmd.com.
Julia Griffin at OneTrueSelf.com, ONETrueSelf.com, and you're listening to the Power of Inspiration and Awakening Radio. We're talking about changes that we can make on a spiritual and physical level with nature's help, why it's important, and some shortcuts so you can change quickly. Micah Nillson is my special guest, and I hope you'll pay very close attention and use her knowledge to move into your next stage of awakening. Micah, I wonder if we can begin by your sharing your website and letting our listeners know how they can get in touch with you.
Oh, certainly, certainly. So the main website, which I've just redone and I'm very proud of, I think it's very beautiful, is al-kemi.com. And then they can email me if they want to. There's a link at the top of the page to send an email, or if you just feel like typing it out, it's alkemi@al-kemi.com. And yeah, they can track us down there. We have a newsletter that we put out. All of our spagyrics are there, lots of articles, lots of information. Because I know there's a bit of a learning curve with what we do. We joke that it's so old that it's new. And so there's a lot to learn to work with it. And we are here to educate people and help them through it.
There's a huge amount to learn. I wondered if you could talk about some of the elixirs and some of the changes that you've witnessed with people who have really worked on this. And I want to say here, if you take these elixirs, you need to have an intent. For example, if I take one, I always intend the change that I want, and I ask for it to come in a good, positive, and balanced way, which is helpful because they do respond to that. And then tell us about how you've seen people change, and what we're going to talk about Venus. I think that's where we were going, and Venus is love and other things. So start by telling us about Venus. We all want more love.
We all do. That's not a bad thing at all. So yeah, I have kind of three different people that I've worked with over the years whose stories stand out. And I think the interesting thing about it is, as you said, intention is so important. And all three stories are with the same exact medicine, and yet very, very different things happen because each person is different, but also because intentions are different. So we were talking earlier about the idea of as above, so below, and the classical planetary archetypes. And so those planets have an orbit, they have harmony, they govern energies that are reflected here within plants. And so, as I said, each of our spagyrics has a different rulership, and it's processed on certain times so that it can carry that energy and help you reprocess your best relationship with that perfect energy. And it's important, I think, to also think about these planetary energies with the kind of classical philosophy idea of eudaimonia, that there's a middle point, not too much, not too little, there's a balance point in the middle. And so our rose magistry, that is the most Venus spagyric that we make. It's rose, which is, of course, such a beautiful flower and such an important flower in healing. And it relates to love and beauty and refinement and the arts and all these lovely Venus things. So the first person I'm thinking of, it was at least 15 years ago or so, we were at a festival that we were setting up, and we set up our booth, and we have little testers, and we talk to people, and we say, oh, what are you working on? And give them a few drops to support it and talk about it and work with them. And it's a lot of fun. I love it. So a lady comes in and she wants to try something, and she's just left a bad relationship. It was a while ago, and she feels like she's ready for a new one, and she wants to be open enough to attract good love into her life. And kind of off to the side, there's a gentleman standing there kind of listening in, and he steps in and he says, I need that too. And so I give him our rose. And rose is Venus. I use it here because it's about being open-hearted. It's about being connected to that energy of love and willing to accept it, which is so important, and also radiating the energy so that you attract more of it into your life. And so each of these people takes some drops, and they hang out with us a bit and start talking to each other. They leave together, and they become the most wonderful couple. And they build a lifelong relationship from that moment of stepping up, and as you said, intention, stepping up and saying, this is what I want, help me be ready for it. And I think that's so crucial. They didn't come to me and say, make this happen. They came to me and said, make me ready for this to happen. And I think that's a really important aspect of that.
Change me so I can create what my heart asks me to create is such an important prayer.
It is, yeah, and make me ready to receive that. I'm open to the idea, but I don't know how to receive it, not fix it all for me while I go do something else. I think that's a really important, kind of contrast.
You just hit on one of the most important things, which is that we have to receive. Usually what we're not getting, we don't know how to receive.
Exactly. That's a really good point. And I think that was one of the, rose for so many reasons here, but the open-heartedness that it creates allows you to be open to receive that, instead of being closed up because of whatever happened in your past that didn't go well. And we learn from the past, and that's important, but sometimes you also have to just be open and say, you know what, this is fresh and new. I'm going forward with a more open attitude towards it.
And I think that's a big thing that's happening among people who are awakened. If we go to a higher level, sure, it was karmic. Sure, you've experienced this with the same people before. Hopefully you're getting over it. But bringing the hope back in and opening to receiving is such an important piece of it. And these elixirs definitely help with it from my experience.
They do. And then in kind of contrast, I suppose this is our Venus cautionary tale that we tell people. Even further back than that, 25, 26 years ago, when we were first doing this work, we were working with a lot of astrologers, which was really cool because we were helping them look at their customers' charts and rebalance things that might be badly aspected and work with it from that standpoint. So an astrologer we were working with was looking at our magistries in particular for that. And he wanted to try one just to experience it and see what we had to offer. And I said, whatever you want to try. And he says, oh, how about Venus? That's really easy. It'll be fun. I'll try Venus. And I said, okay. That's, you have free will. You do it. So he takes his drops and he goes out clubbing. And there's nothing wrong with that. He goes out dancing. He has a great time. It's awesome. But he gets really more caught up in the lust and the sexual energy of it, which again is fine, but not necessarily this particular energy. And he had really kind of scoffed at and ignored my warning that Venus is a powerful energy. There's softness and there's, cushy pillows and strawberries and whatever, but it's a powerful energy too. So, be careful about that. But he kind of ignored that and said, oh no, it'll be fine. It'll be easy. So he meets this gorgeous woman while he's out dancing. He takes her home. And when he wakes up, she's gone and he's been robbed. Venus is about love as it was in that first couple, because they came to me and they said, open my heart to love, and love arrived for them. But Venus is also about illusion. Venus is about glamour, about false charm. Venus is about surfaces of things. That's the beauty aspect. But if we ignore the depths of the energy, then that surface level is where we get stuck with it. And that was his particular journey with it.
Right. And that could have been an incredible learning experience for him.
It probably was on some level.
Yeah, on some level, but still. I mean, and I want to say this
he knows something he didn't know before.
Anybody who really works with love wholeheartedly, you have to go through so many judgments that are within you and so many shortcomings within yourself. But every time you do it, you move so much more deeply into a state of both a personal and universal love. So I always send pink light to conflicts because pink light is heart light. And you add it to something like this and you've got something really powerful going on, in my opinion. Yeah, that's not
and
that's a
it
normal
shows you
thing.
what your relationship with that energy is, and is it good or bad? Is it, do you need some work on things? There's, each one of us has interplanetary energies that are very strong and very good for us that we can rely on, and energies that we don't have as good a relationship with. And if we push that in the wrong, disrespectful way, we can, kind of get our butt kicked. Whereas if we work with it and push it in a constructive way, it can help us, through that toughness and into a better place with it.
Yeah, and we just all have to work with duality and keep moving back into love, because that's sort of like the paradigm that we have right now. But how powerful is it that nature can help us to find love, that nature can make us feel more alive? Those are really, really beautiful things. So I was going to go over a few questions that people often ask me. And the first one...
sure. I have one more Venus story if you want to hear it.
Yeah. No, tell us, because those are great stories. Go ahead.
I want to leave everyone with a happy Venus story instead of the cautionary tale. So, and this is one of my favorite people that I've worked with. So this was another festival many years ago, and I met an artist who was selling the most beautiful work. And I bought one of his pieces. He did these amazing paintings of different goddesses, and he was so connected to that energy. I bought a painting of Tara that he did, and it's magnificent. It's one of my favorite things. And I was talking with this artist about his work, and he had terrible artist block for months. He was not able to paint. He had no inspiration. He wasn't making any work, and he was really upset about it. And so same thing. I gave him some of the Venus Magistry of Rose. because besides love, Venus is about beauty and refinement and art. And I think especially when art is coming as an expression of love, like the devotion that I just saw in his work, that's where he was painting from. And I felt like that would really support that. And so a few months later, he's at another festival and he comes over and he gives me the most beautiful prints that he's made of a painting he did of the Virgin Mary holding a rose. And it's just beautiful. And he tells me the story. He said that the night I gave him that rose magistry, he went back to his studio so inspired. And he painted this work of the piece he calls Rose Offering. And it started months of the most connected and inspired of his artistic career. And he created some of his best works, and he wanted me to know that. And I think this story really says the importance of meeting it halfway. You know, Venus is refinement and beauty, but even taking those drops, he didn't choose to, go out partying or just go back to bed that day. He went back to his studio and he picked up his brush and he did the work because he asked to have this flow opened, but he still had to manifest it. And I think it really shows how, depending on how you work with it, it can manifest so many different aspects of Venus. Each of these people had their own relationship with what Venus is. And some of these people were able to find a really right relationship with it through their own intent and their own actions. And that intelligence of the plant, I think, is what the spagyric processing is particularly good at bringing across, that carries through that work and arrives in you so that it can adapt to what you need and help you offer that particular energy in activation of your gift that you have to the world.
What a beautiful, beautiful story. And I was thinking as you were telling me that, how your work with plant intelligence has made you so sensitive to what other people feel and what other people need. And I was thinking that's the universal expression of plant intelligence, is that we connect more deeply with other people and we can express our gift to bring more beauty and love and awakening into the world. That's what plant intelligences, I think, really do.
That's my approach to it too, is just feeling like I am introducing the plants to people and introducing people to the plants. And I'm a go-between because I have an understanding of it that not everyone else has. And I can be that channel for the plants to find the people that they can help and people to find the plants that can help them.
It's a wonderful, wonderful way to be. One of the things, and I don't want to go too deeply into it because I want to ask you questions that I think other people may have, but one of the things I'm really fascinated by is that you can look at your personal astrological chart or have an astrologer look at it, and the spagyrics can actually help with your astrological chart, right?
They can. You can do the reading of the rulership of the day of the week, which I mentioned, which is more the Hermetic tradition. But we do have a lot of astrologers working with the traditional wheel chart, and that you can look at and see if a planet is badly aspected, if it's, squaring another planet it doesn't get along with, or if your chart is a little bit, imbalanced or lopsided. You can supply, more of the energy that seems problematic and work through it. You can supply kind of opposite energy. Like I have a lot of very strong earth in my chart, which is great and super useful for me. But sometimes it's also helpful for me to take herbs that are a little bit more on the fire side of things to kind of pull myself out of that and lift my energy a little bit more. So yeah, you can look at that, and you can look at aspects or houses or rulerships and just tinker. Now again, we're working with the 7 archetypes and not the signs, but each of the signs has a rulership too, so you can get at them that way.
Yeah, it's just something very interesting for people who are a little more deeply involved in astrology. So I'm going to ask some of the questions that I often hear during sessions. How can I make more money? What would work for that?
Well, that is a popular enough question. Well, that's a popular enough question that we have a formula called abundance. Yeah,
so
it is. And it's, we do. And it's funny how many, and I don't mean to dismiss people's issues. I actually love the universality of it. I love that in the years and years and years of thousands of people we've met, there's so few actual questions because we're all kind of in the same spot. We're all kind of working on the same things. And there's a universality to what each of us is dealing with in our journeys. And I think that's a really beautiful thing. It puts us in good company. And if you look at it that way, it helps you realize, oh, my struggle is not only my struggle. It's all of us here. And yeah, abundance is certainly one of them.
Well, it's also what we're talking about. How can we open to our birthright from the universe? Because if you help people on an individual basis, you very quickly find that there's some type of personal or mental or emotional block. And if any one person moves through this, it benefits all of us, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I've definitely seen that in our time in working with people. You know, when we set up at these festivals, it just gets really busy, and people have to talk about their personal problems in front of a bunch of other people, and that's a difficult thing to do, but that's just the environment of what we're working on. But it also becomes a really beautiful thing of people helping each other, and you know, somebody hearing, oh, I didn't know anybody else struggled with that. I'm so happy to talk with you about it. And so creating that on a little micro level, I think, is a really wonderful idea, and thinking about creating it on a bigger level too. Like you said, each of us works on something. It's going to be a little bit easier for someone else somewhere to work on it too.
Yeah, so however your problem falls into this, please know you're helping everyone. It's not like something is the matter with you. It's like something's right, or you wouldn't wonder.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like my grandmother used to always say, when you know better, you do better. Just think of it that way, you know? So
exactly.
yeah, abundance, that's one of our formulas. The main key ingredients in it are a few different things. One is our Melissa or lemon balm magistry of Jupiter. And so this is one of the magistries, like the rose I talked about. It's very Jupiter, and Jupiter is about expansion, right? And grandiosity and generosity and making things big and grand and cool. And Jupiter is also about temperance too, though, which is important. Jupiter is about having the right amount of things in balance. So not greed, but also not poverty, right in the middle there. And Melissa, I think, is an herb that expresses that quality very, very well, because it's very cheery and happy and expansive, and it just brings in that kind of a very generous flow of things.
Oh,
and then the other herb that's
add it, because it's a happy herb.
It is, and it's if you have a garden and you grow it, you will always have it. So just be aware of that. But it's a beautiful herb to work with. It was actually Paracelsus' favorite herb. He felt like it had the most life force and the most intelligence of all of the plants, and so I always have it wherever I am. And then one of the other cornerstone herbs in that formula is astragalus seed. Now, this is the same plant that astragalus root is from, which some people might know as a great immune tonic. But the seed is used in Taoist medicine as a more magical herb for people who leak energy, is how they explain it. And so it helps you hold that energy within yourself and kind of contain your own flow, contain your own vitality, so it's not just slipping through you. So that's what kind of holds that Jupiter quality kind of within you. And then the other important part of abundance is kind of a formula within a formula. So this is another, you know, if you had to say one of my top few, I guess this would be one of them. So within that abundance formula is another formula, which is our gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And, you know, frankincense and myrrh are tree resins. They're used as incense. And then the gold in that is a true alchemically extracted oil of gold. And of course, the Bible is the source for that formula, right? It's the treasures of the three wise men that they brought to the infant Yeshua at his birth. And each of those is symbolic and important, and you kind of can see why they belong in this particular formula. So gold is obviously a treasure. Pay your way in the world, you know, use it to buy groceries, pay rent, things like that. That's pretty straightforward. Myrrh is really bitter and really purifying. And in many, many cultures, myrrh represents the bitter truth of the situation. And so myrrh carries the lessons of learning from your most difficult experiences, right? Learning from your pain, learning from your suffering, and integrating that into the treasure of very pure, very strong wisdom. And for that reason, myrrh appears again at the scene of the cross too. And then frankincense, the third treasure, is an incense that's used for connection to the sacred. And so the gift or the treasure that this one brings is realizing your own divine nature, that understanding that really all of us are divine made flesh. All of us are sacred on some level. We are all connected to that divine intelligence. And so bringing all of these together, all types of treasures, the measurable, the mundane, the higher, the more ethereal, connecting all of that kind of brings a really well-rounded quality of abundance to that formula.
That's quite wonderful. I can feel it as you're talking. So another question that I often hear is, how can I become happier? I'm just not happy, or I don't know what happiness is.
That's a tough one. Yeah, that is a really tough one. And I know that struggle myself. This world sometimes is not always super conducive to happiness, unfortunately. One of the helpers I really like for that, and earlier you would also ask for just kind of a good starting herb. I think this would be a really good one. It's a Tibetan herb, and it's called rhodiola. And it grows in the high Himalayas. It's a succulent. It looks kind of like hens and chickens. And it's used by the Tibetan monks for meditation. It's used as a sort of spiritual food during their long times of practice. And it's also an herb of premonition. For a very long time, it's been used by the warrior monks to prepare for battle and to see the outcome and avoid problems within the battle. Now, in our modern understanding of rhodiola, it's an adaptogen, so it's a really good energy and vitality tonic, and it increases endorphins in the system. So it increases your own happy chemicals. Those are the chemicals that you have when you eat really spicy food or you do vigorous exercise. It uplifts your mood very, very quickly, which is nice, and it shows you that brightness again. And what I like about rhodiola in particular is how it brings those qualities together. So it has this chemical property of just brightening your mood by giving your endorphins a little boost. And it's an adaptogen, so it helps with real vitality. But since it's also that premonition herb, it helps you see a brighter future. It carries that energy of seeing into the future, preparing for it, actualizing it, and just seeing it brighter ahead of you. And it pulls all that together. And I think that's a really, really nice herb for pulling out of sadness and depression, but also just for starting on any kind of working for that reason of just seeing a positive outcome before it's even happened so that you can just go right to it.
So if I were going to begin a project, and let's just say I could see that it was going to be 6 months to a year, I should probably take this for a moon cycle or two before I actually start the project?
You could, or you could even just start it when you're starting your project.
Yeah.
I would start it ahead of time if you felt like the project needed more visioning, but if you had a pretty clear picture of how you were starting, just start taking rhodiola when you start the project. And since it is an adaptogen, you can take it for long periods of time. I take it for most of the winter because here in the Northwest, the winter is quite gloomy, and I find that can get me down. And so I just take rhodiola every day, and it really helps with that. But yeah, you could take it just throughout your project, take it, the visioning part of your project, because again, it's that looking forward in time, which you need at the beginning of a project, and also the positivity. So, in the Hermetic tradition and in many, many wisdom traditions that come from that, seeing what you are trying to do as already completed is a very important part of making things happen.
Absolutely. But so I could start this on the new moon if I wanted to. For my after
that would be
projects,
great.
And that would work really well. Yeah. Okay, so one more question on this, because this is a question I get often, is I want to move somewhere else, but I've looked and I can't find anything.
For that, I would say the abromelon, I think, would be a really good one. Just because, as I said, it really helps you with being in connection with your higher self, because a lot of times, and I've moved a lot of times, and I can say from experience that many times the place you think you want to move is probably not the place for you. And when I've been in that same position of trying to find a place or trying to move to a particular place, it's not working. I'll take the abromelon and sit with it and travel. And that's usually when it becomes very clear. Oh, no, actually, I should be over here instead, or this is not what I should be doing right now. It'll kind of guide you back to, okay, what your mind thought you were supposed to be doing is really not quite right. Let's realign with what your higher purpose is supposed to be, and then that will flow for you.
Right. And so just because I have this on my list, finding the right person would be the Venus formula, but you really need to be in the right state of mind when you're taking that one, I would assume.
I think with all of them you do. I think it's important to sit and just think about why you're taking each one of them, and just be in that state of mind. So yeah, but either the rose by itself or a formula that we do that's called Heart Opener, and that has the rose in it to bring in that energy that it has of devotion and openness and sensuality. But it also has a couple other herbs in it. It has cacao in it, which is the source of chocolate. And cacao carries the chemicals that are very much like that early romance infatuation. So it kind of opens the excitement of the situation of looking for somebody. And then it has one of our minerals, Sugerics, in it too. It has an extract of ruby, because we wanted to add a little bit of fire to that mix, a little bit of passion and a little bit of spark to it. So yeah, either the rose by itself or the Heart Opener, those are both really nice for that.
Right. And as we're coming to the end, this is a really interesting thing. Micah was in my last summit, for those of you who heard it or didn't hear it. Right before I was given her name, I had been thinking about how I had been taking spagyrics in 2008 and what a big difference they had made in my life. And I was thinking about that, and I was thinking, I wonder if it's time for me to take them again. And within like 4 or 5 days, I had your name and your email address. So for the people who are listening to this, there's probably a really good reason that you're hearing this. It's not just to hear about what plants do or about what nature does. Take your time and think about it. And if it keeps coming up in your mind, these formulas are not terribly expensive. Invest in 1 or 2 and see what kind of change it makes for you. So, Micah, I wondered if you would please tell our listeners again about your website. I know you have a lot to read and to learn on your website, and how they can reach you.
We do. Certainly. So the website is al-kemi.com. And they can look there, they can read articles, they can see all of our spagyrics with information about them, they can email us, they can join our newsletter and hear about all kinds of new things. And then if you want to email me directly, you can do so at alkemi@al-kemi.com. And we are a tiny, tiny company. It's just myself and my husband, Paul. So if you reach out to us, you will get one of us, and we will help you figure out what you want to work on.
That's wonderful. So everyone, here's your tip of the week. When you combine spiritual and physical elements of nature, you can create positive change much more quickly. You also have more power than you think you do. Through meditation, positive visuals, and shortcuts, you can change the world around you. You only need connection, belief, and practice. So please join me in making personal changes and holding a higher vision to create a better world through your inner self and your positive thoughts. I want to thank you for tuning in to the Power of Inspiration and Awakening show on Transformation Radio. Please join me on the 2nd and 4th Wednesdays of every month at 12 noon Eastern, 11 Central, and 9 a.m. Pacific. Our next show will be in December. We're going to work on not feeling as much stress, finding more of your inner self, and creating more of a life you love. Have a great week, and I'll see you back here next time.
Thank you for listening to the Power of Inspiration and Awakening Radio with Julia Griffin, to master a higher frequency for a new state of mind. Join us next time as Julia takes us deeper into the memory of the moments of light where transcendence and enlightenment emerge. The memory of the jewel of consciousness is always lived within you. To tap into waves of energy and create huge changes by imagining the beauty of the vision and desires that are hidden in the heart. Learn to find your way back to nature, beauty, and your own heart, which holds the secrets of your existence and future. To discover more about Julia's adventures, animal communication, and the teachings she brings to every show, visit OneTrueSelf.com. That's OneTrueSelf.com. That's ONE, TrueSelf.com.